Welcome everyone to the third edition of Project Citizen in Focus. We are really glad that you're able to join us this evening. For those of you who are new, we have been working our way through the Project Citizen scope and sequence of the curriculum. We started out our first session doing kind of a general overview of why you should use Project Citizen and the different easy ways you can incorporate it into a curriculum. And then last time around, we focused on the selection of a problem. And so we talked through ways that you can help guide students and potentially help navigate through controversial topics that students may have an interest in. So we've now reached the point where we've selected the problem, and now we're getting into the point of research. And as all of you who are Project Citizen educators or coordinators know, part of that research often involves reaching out to government officials and potentially also preparing the students at a later point to present to government officials to advocate for their issue that they're focusing on. So today's focus is on just that, policy and government advocacy. And I will happily hand things over to your amazing facilitators for this evening, Jackie Viana and Marcy Taylor-Toma, and they'll be able to recognize their special guests. So please take it away.
Hello, everyone. How are you? For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jackie Viana, and I have the honor to be working with my dear friend, Marcy Taylor-Thomas, and I work for Miami-Dade County Public Schools. I was a teacher for 18 years. I did Project Citizen for 16 of them. And now I have the honor of overseeing 6 to 12 curriculum for Miami-Dade County Public Schools. And I'm super honored to be doing this. We have our guest speaker who has joined. So maybe Marcy and Sammy, can we hold on introductions afterwards? So as Emily stated, we're going to be talking about public policy and advocacy. Public policy cannot be, I think we lost our speaker. Public policy cannot happen without government. And you're going to see that in our presentation today. I've had the honor of working with amazing public policy makers when I was in the classroom, but not because he's present here. And I'm going to show you a video after he speaks from 2001. Yes, I see you, Renee. But he served 8 years in the Florida House of Representatives. Then he served 8 years as a state senator, and then now he is a commissioner for District 13. And not only he's a dear friend, but he is somebody that I look up to. When I was in the classroom, there was no other way to introduce bills or work on policy if it wouldn't have been for Senator Rene Garcia, who has joined us and is going to talk to us about advocacy, government advocacy, but from the government perspective. So Rene, thank you for being here. I know you're super busy, so thank you so much for joining us.
No, please. Thank you, Jackie, and thank everyone for being on here. And I'm not busy. We're all busy. Life becomes busy for all of us, and no one's time is more valuable than anyone else's. So I appreciate all of you being on here and listening to this has-been legislator now serving a prison sentence on the Miami-Dade County Commission, which it's been an awesome experience. Look, and I think Jackie, what do you want me to talk about? What do you want me to hit on? Or you want me to open up for questions? I'm perfectly fine with that as well, however you want to do this.
So perhaps you can talk a little bit. What made you engage or what made you listen to 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, high schoolers when you were in the Florida House or the Florida Senate? What made you do this? You were busy. You only had, you could only introduce 6 bills at a time when you were in the House. When you were in the Senate, it was different. But what made you listen to the students? And why do you so strongly believe in Project Citizen?
Well, what Jackie's not telling you all is that she has a great gift of persuasion, and I was scared of her. This is why I did it.
Oh my goodness, Renee. They're recording this, so you know.
I know. No, look, the truth of the matter is, the reason I did it, look, I met Jackie a couple of years back at Hialeah Middle School. And Hialeah Middle School was my alma mater, a school that I went to. Back then it was Hialeah Junior High. And as a young council member in the city of Hialeah, I really buy into the notion of public service. You have to find that legislator. I think we all start off believing in it, because I think everyone that runs because they want to see a change, they want to make an impact in their community. But along the line, doesn't matter from what party they come from, it evolves and it turns into something different. I'm not saying it's a bad different, but it's just something different. They have certain issues they're focused on, and they tend to forget the constituency that they represent. I, at an early age, when I got elected to the legislature, prior to being in the House, I started getting involved with the schools that I participated in. I went to Hialeah Middle School, I went to Hialeah High, even in my elementary. One of those guys I believe in giving back, and still in the county commission, I still do that. And now we have a nice pot of money that I go back to the schools and say, listen, tell me how I can help. And even then, it's a little more difficult. And I do believe the importance of listening to our youth. I started off as a young council member where a lot of people assumed or would always tell me that I was way too young to get started. And because of all the naysayers, I pushed forward. And I ended up being the chairman of the Health Appropriations Committee in Florida, overseeing a $35 billion budget at that time. And I think that was, the poetic justice at that time when I can say I did it, right? But the reality is I do believe in empowering the youth, because when I started, I have people who helped me up. And I try to take that knowledge, that notion of bringing people up and allowing students to understand that they do have a place in our society, they do have a place in our political discourse. They do have a voice. But if we don't empower them to believe that, then everything that we do just falls on deaf ears. So that's why, I met Jackie. And I want to say 99 or 2000, 2001, Jackie, I don't remember.
2001.
2001. And she had a great group of students. And they were working on, was it a drug-free zone? What was it?
Yeah, drug-free zone in parks.
Yeah,
Parks and libraries.
Can't really remember that. And that one project, that one experience for me was so positive that I stayed involved with the program. I think you have to make it a positive experience for a new legislator or for someone that's coming into your classroom. And at the beginning, it was, I'm going to say it was a win-win for everyone. It was a win-win for the school. It was a win-win for the students. And it was a win-win for the elected official, who was me at that time, who got press coverage. When we had this amazing event, it was a great event, but I never expected for it to take off the way that it did. And Governor Bush came down, we signed a bill. What was his name? He's the Attorney General. Arenberg. He was a Democrat that carried the bill in the Florida Senate when I was in the Florida House. And we worked well on this together, and everyone won. So then what happens after that year, at least in Florida, in the legislature, for my whole time in the legislature, I always said, listen, I'm going to do something for these kids, because it was such a great experience. And, and it was rewarding, not only, spiritually and emotionally seeing these kids grow, but politically as well. You know, I'm not going to lie to you, any of you here. The reality is, I got all this press coverage. I got all this. So this is great. This is a no-brainer. And then once I started to do that in the House, the interesting thing is that you started to see a lot of other legislators coming on board, not only from Dade County, but all across the state. Oh, we want to do this Project Citizen thing. What is this Project Citizen thing? You know, why don't we get one? And it just keeps on evolving like that. And that's how it blossomed here in Florida, or at least actually no, in Dade County and across Florida. That was a pretty cool experience. Republicans and Democrats fighting to judge programs. There was another, Jackie. What was the other? It's not only a Project Citizen. There was something else.
We the people. We the people.
We the People. That's the other one. I remember my buddy. He's a judge now in Broward, and I served with him in the Senate as well. He got involved through with We the People. He was like, I want to do this, you know. But I think that there was nothing else going on with projects. I don't mean nothing else. I don't mean it that way, but no one from Project Citizen approached him, so he ended up he went out looking for We the People. So that's how it kind of evolved. And this is, I think, what. And I'm saying all this long story. I don't want to bore you all, but that's how I got involved. And then I fell in love with the program. I fell in love with the students. I fell in love with seeing these kids getting involved in the community and making an impact and a change. And it's amazing when you connect legislators with students, what could really happen. And then the craziest thing, like teachers, like all of you professors and teachers here, when you run into them, when you run into these students 10 years, 20 years later, and they say, I was part of Project Citizen. Thank you for doing this. You brought me up to Tallahassee. You gave us this tour. And that, you know, that's something that you'll never forget. And for me, Project Citizen has always had a special place in my heart, and it continues to do so. And, you know, whenever I can come out and judge, I definitely will. Whenever Jackie needs any help from our office. Again, she could be a little intimidating at times, but I love her. She hates when I do these things. We're friends. But we have that relationship and that bond. And I think it's important for all of you to build that relationship and that bond with legislators in your area. Yeah, a lot of times we don't like the legislators for whatever reason, if it's a different party or so forth, or we just don't like their politics. But sometimes, you know, as teachers and professors in certain districts where that representative is, you know, we have to learn how to work with each other. And if we learn how to do that, I think it goes a long way to teach the students as well, to be able that you don't have to like your legislator, but you have to be able to work with them. And that's how we start changing the narrative that we have in our country right now. It is so polarized, as we all know. And I think it really starts with teaching our students how to be able to work with one another, even with people that we don't like. And like I've always said, we don't have to like each other. The one thing we do have to do is respect one another, even if we don't like each other's way of life or whatever it is. And that's what I think one of the things that Project Citizens tends to do is do that. And we've seen it with the students that I've worked with throughout the years, and then seen them now in a professional setting. It's pretty darn cool, you know, and see how they've evolved, and they'll remember things and just little things that you say to them or worked on with them, or just that you simply open the door for them. They'll never forget that, and you see that they're playing it forward in their career paths. So it's pretty cool. That's what I did. So
Thank you, Senator. I do not know. Thank you for sharing, because, you know, Senator Garcia is as real as it gets. One thing he didn't share with you is that every year he will tell the teachers, not just me, any teacher, that he will sponsor a bill, but also he will provide funds for us to go to Tallahassee and visit the Capitol. And what you do not know, Renee, is that I have a small clip from when Governor Jeb Bush came. And I actually have the kid that spoke with the glasses. He's now a doctor in Broward Health. He's a cardiologist.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And he's going to be speaking. He's working right now, but he told me whenever he stops seeing patients that he's going to jump in. So I just wanted to thank you. And I wanted to ask the rest of the panelists, maybe Marcy or anybody else, if you guys have any questions. I know Renee's on a tight schedule, and I promised him that we will not take much of his time. But if you have any pending questions, Marcy, I know you have some questions. Please go ahead and ask the senator.
Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really do appreciate your wonderful commitment to Project Citizen and to your community and to the students. I guess my question to you, I'm been either a Project Citizen teacher or coordinator since I guess 95 maybe.
Yeah.
And have been working with the students and coordinating programs. But my concern is something that you mentioned, and that is I would say that the students that I worked with in middle school, I felt as though they certainly felt as though they could trust their government and their government officials. Now I believe that some of our students aren't as comfortable with communicating or contacting government officials, and there's some level of distrust. And I'm wondering, I like your ideas of, you don't have to really like me, but respect me and work together with me. But have you noticed this level of distrust with maybe community members and people that you worked with before, or even having teachers and students communicate with you less over the last few years?
Well, that's where we are in our country right now, unfortunately, and it permeates and it trickles down to our students as well. This is why it's so hard for us. It's imperative upon us to try to guide them and direct them, not to buy into that narrative that we have right now all around us, that we, the students, the people, can change that narrative. I know it sounds idealistic for some of us, for me to say that, but I really believe that. The apathy of not getting involved is the reason that we have the problems that we have right now. And yes, to your question, I think I'm answering it in a global sense, but you're asking it at the school system. Yes, I have seen it more where teachers are going less and less to elected officials. As a matter of fact, here in Miami-Dade County Public Schools had this rule. Not until now we had the new school district, new school board members come in, that they've softened it up a little bit, where elected officials could not go into the classroom unless they come to the school board member or something to that effect. And when I started off my career, I don't like call it a career, but it is a career. I've been doing it for 25 years, I guess, right? My public service life anyway. I started going a lot to Hialeah High, and it was easy. I was buddy to a debate club. I will go speak for the senior classes, just talk about careers and, just try to see if I can change one life. I didn't care. It took time, but as time went on and as teachers left and those relationships and those bonds broke, it became more and more difficult for me, a former student government president of the school, to come into the school to even help with money. They were even scared to even ask to take, if I could raise them money, because it got to that point. So I say all that to tell you, yes, it's become a little harder, and it really depends on maybe the administrator of the school, depending on the country that you're in, or actually the school board members. So I think this is where a Project Citizen program can really try to break down some of those barriers to allow. And listen, do all elected officials come into the school for good reasons? No, I don't think they do. They all want to get reelected, and maybe they see these students as future voters. I don't see it that way. I see it because kids are not going to vote for you until they're in their 30s. You know that very well. They're not going to get involved until much later on in life. And so anyone that's thinking they're going to go into a high school and these kids are going to vote for you, it's not going to happen. But someone like a group like Project Citizen really can start breaking down those barriers and say, yes, we do need our elected officials to come into the school, whether at the city council level or a county commissioner or even a state representative, so students can understand that this is their voice. And this is a representative democracy that we live in. If we don't like them, we vote them out. We can't sit there and be apathetic. So yeah, sorry, Marcy, I give you a long answer like a typical politician, but yes, it's become more difficult because of the policies at the school district sometimes. But now With now we got elect, we have Robert Alonso here elected, and we've had such a great working relationship. You know, his mindset's a little different. He's reaching out to, and like I tell folks all the time, school board member, reach out to your county commissioner, reach out to your state representative. We need to bring these people together, your local guys, bring them together because the same people we represent. And he's doing a good job of bringing us together. It usually starts with the school. It really does start with the schools.
Thank you so much for that wonderful answer. And I agree with you. Building relationships is part of the advocacy and starting building trust and also which influences public policy. So I wish we had all of our elected officials were exactly like you.
Yep.
And you're really well represent how we believe our elected officials should be. So really appreciate you being with us this evening.
It's okay. Look, and I'll give you this advice. I do some consulting now. I've been doing a lot of consulting in the healthcare world because that's where I've always been. But I've been able to get a couple of clients in the education field, more so on the public sector side as well. But when I speak to school board members, I'm shocked how many of them don't speak to their legislators. It's like, wait a minute, no, you understand that these are the folks that are funding your schools, at least in Florida. Well, it's on every state. You know, you need to have those relationships. Again, you don't have to like them. I mean, you get Republicans or Democrats in charge, but they have to at least know who you are and bring those people into the schools. And that's incumbent upon but now teachers is a little different, right? Because you have to go through the hierarchy of the principal and the administration. But we do have to bring them in. And Project Sit-in is a great way to do that. Then they see what's happening at the schools, and they can see the lack of, some of the policies that they're implementing in our case in Tallahassee, what they're doing or not doing in the school districts. So again, when I talk about a win-win, this is the win-win. Bring them into the school, so then they can't hide. Oh, I haven't been there. No, I'm going to bring them into the school. Look, this is what we have.
Wonderful. That's it. Thank you so much, Rene. Does anybody else have a question for the senator? Well,
You put your hand down. I'm here with my accountant. You put your hand down.
Who's there, David?
No, my accountant, my real accountant, Albert.
Oh, anybody?
Yes, I'm late on my taxes, folks. I'm late.
Oh boy.
I always get an extension to do them in October, but I totally missed it this year. So.
Oh no, we don't want to hear that, Rene. Emily, you had something.
Well, I was hoping to ask kind of a logistical question. So when the teachers and the students, they're working on the Project Citizen projects, and they are getting to the point where, they'd like to reach out to their legislator, what do you recommend is the best approach to do that? Is it more impactful, for example, if the outreach comes from the teacher, or is it more impactful if the outreach comes from the students themselves? So just, trying to give the teachers here some quality take-home tips.
Thank you, Emily.
That's a great question, because for me, the way it worked was with Jackie, right? Jackie was the one that first made the contact. And I think it took some time, Jackie, right before I got out to school, but I finally went out to the school.
Yep.
Jackie was, I don't want to say, she just kept on. Hey, don't forget kept on calling our office. Don't give up. And then what I would recommend is forget about an email. Emails are great. I know in the world that we live today, everyone sends an email. To a handwritten note. When you send a handwritten note to a legislator, that goes to the top of the priority list. I'm telling you, that's a little secret. We all know when you go to a party and you receive a handwritten note from someone who says, "Oh, thank you." You're like, "Oh, wait a minute." Same thing happens to legislators and politicians. When someone takes the time to write a letter like that, it opens, and everyone in the office knows about it. For the most part, can't generalize. And then the other thing I would think, phone call and then following up, having the teacher go with the students one day to the class in there, because what happens is when you first go in, chances are you may not meet with a legislator. I have an open door policy. Even with an open door policy, you can't see everyone. So you may come in the first time, you meet with a staffer, you get disappointed. I just met with a staffer, but hopefully it's a chief of staff. If it's a chief of staff, it's just as good. So don't ever get disappointed with that. but you start with one of the staffers. So they have staffers. In some states, legislators don't have a lot of staff. So you have to rely on their timing, or you have to go meet them at work. So every state's a little different on how their state legislators and governments are structured, but the local level, the same thing. Try to set up a meeting. It is impactful. The teacher goes with the students, absolutely, because it's hard to say no to a student. Say, "Hey, we want you to come in," and I've seen it time and time again when teachers have gone in, or have had a conversation, or the elected official goes out to the school, meets them, and then when they call, the kids call and say, "Hey, why aren't you back in the school?" It's hard for them to say no to students. But the handwritten no, I'm telling you right now, the handwritten note or nice written, not a form letter, something that it's out of the ordinary, that goes a long, long way.
That is great advice. The director for Project Citizen, Dana Phillips, says she thinks it's such a great advice that she might incorporate it in our book. So here you go, Renee.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, thank you so much. I wish you could stay for the entire.
Wait, I want to see this video you have.
Oh, okay, guys. I guess I'm gonna have to show the video now.
No, but look,
it's 1 minute. It's 1 minute.
cool.
So,
But Jackie, if I may, I just want to thank you all for the work you're doing. Trust me, I know, especially as educators, sometimes you think it goes unnoticed, but know that you're changing people's lives, kids' lives every day. And because the work that you're doing, it's very impactful and meaningful. It's up to us, you all, to change that narrative that we have right now, this polarization that we are facing in this country. I'm hopeful. I think we'll get through it. There's this, every civil society goes through this. And again, I think what we just have to educate our students and our kids and everyone around us is just a level of respecting one another. We don't always have to agree, but we have to understand that we live in this great country and we have to move this country forward. We're only going to move it if we're all moving in the same direction. So thank you for the work that you're all doing. Appreciate you all very much. If I can ever be of help or service, Jackie could bully me. Oh, we can't say that.
oh gosh, they're recording, Renee. They're
I
recording
love
this.
you, Jackie.
Well, okay. I'm gonna share the video.
Jackie.
I love you.
I love you. Thank you for
I'm
what
gonna
you
show
do,
you.
Jackie.
I'm gonna show you the video. Okay, so stay 1 minute.
Yeah.
No, it's not letting me. I don't know why. I think because the video is very, very old, but I promise you guys, I'm going to work on that while Marcy and I continue with the presentation. Sorry, Renee. I'll show it to you another time. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for everything, guys. And Jackie, I love you. Thank you for what you've done for Dade County.
Love you. Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you. Okay, guys. So now we are going to continue with the presentation. So Marcy, I believe you were going to introduce yourself, even though you already did. I don't know if you want to continue, and then we're going to have Sam introduce herself.
Yes, just good evening. Thank you for spending some time with us this evening. I'm the Maryland Project Citizen Coordinator and have been a longtime advocate of Project Citizen and a teacher and a mentor, and love the program. We use it in Maryland in connection with service learning, so it's always been a popular program here. And I'd like to turn it over to Samantha Fowler, who's my go-to mentor for Project Citizen and everything else. So Sam, she's in the classroom doing Project Citizen every year. So say hello to everybody. And
yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm Samantha Fowler, and I currently teach at Northwest High School in lovely Germantown, Maryland.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Sam. And Sam has helped Marcy and I with the technology part. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and share our PowerPoint. Yes, I have a PowerPoint. We can put it into Canvas later, but for now, I'm going to just share the PowerPoint. Okay. So as Emily shared with you, this PowerPoint, this part of the presentation is about public policy and government advocacy. And you already heard a little bit about government advocacy, so we're going to do a little bit of public policy. Project Citizen is public policy. It's influencing public policy. That's how we introduce Project Citizen. What is Project Citizen? For the students to find a public policy problem in the community and to be able to come up with solutions to that public policy problem. And so government and public policy go together, and Project Citizen and public policy go together. I have seen so many times wonderful, wonderful projects, but if they are not a public policy problem, then it's not has nothing to do with Project Citizen. Okay, it's just simply helping the community with a problem. Okay, so this is the introduction, and so this part Sam is going to do it, and the question is, what do you think your students will say? Not you, but your students will say when you ask them. You haven't taught them what public policy is. You just ask them, what do you think is public policy? So go ahead and with your phones, click on the QR code and try to answer it. Try to answer the question, but not as a teacher or as a mentor or as a public was a Project Citizen coordinator, but as a student. What do you think they will answer? So Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, so go ahead and we're gonna make a word cloud with your responses. This is what you all are saying that your students would say. And so obviously the big ones are guidelines, government, rules, laws. Oh, I like it, confusing, crickets. Huh, don't know. Yeah, and I think it's and we're gonna hit on this a lot this evening. I think it's very important to make sure students have a deep understanding of the difference between like a service project versus a public policy problem. And so I'm going to go over later on in the presentation of how I approach teaching kind of local policy making. That way you all can easily take it into your classrooms or share it with your fellow mentors as well. So I guess take maybe 10 more seconds if anybody else wants to add on. But again, this is called, so if you go to mentimeter.com, it's a free application where very easy to use. And I love it, especially for these virtual sessions and things like that. And you can do this like live in a classroom as well. Word clouds is definitely a great strategy for any struggling student. It can help them. You can put an article or Federalist paper, a piece of news or speech, put it into a word cloud, and it can help the students identify immediately what key ideas are, right? Mentimeter also has like voting and polling functions as well. So a really great way to make it interactive, whether it's on Zoom or in class in person, because we know they're on their phones. And I will stop my sharing. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Sammy. Thank you. So I will share now my screen. Back to the PowerPoint, guys. So that's a great way to start debriefing or start a lesson with public policy. Instead of telling them public policy is this, pick on their brains to see what prior knowledge they have about public policy. So we're going to watch a video now, Larry Garston. I know many of you know Larry Garston if you've been doing this for a while, but for those of you who do not know, Larry Garston has written, I believe, 2 or 3 books on public policy. He's a phenomenal scholar on public policy. And also, if you want to find this video, if you go to the center's website, you're going to see on, Emily, help me out here. It used to be called something. But I know it's not on the videos anymore, but it's also on YouTube, okay? And so we're going to share this PowerPoint with Emily, and you can just click on the video. Emily, where is it under now?
Sure. Under our programs, you'll find the drop down for Project Citizen, and it's in there.
In societies, we have governments. The role of governments is to make sure that people get along. The role of governments is to make sure that basic needs and obligations of society are met. And the role of governments is to try to determine what we do with resources, who gets those resources, who doesn't, And why? A lot of things for government to do. Much of this is wrapped up in the making of public policy. We call it public policy because it's the kinds of decisions made by governments rather than decisions that we make every day as individuals. We define public policy as the combination of basic decisions, commitments, and action steps undertaken by those who hold or affect government positions. Public policy is a response to demands. Public policy is based on law and established rules. Public policy is rarely neutral because some will benefit much more from what governments decide to do and others will not. Public policies are hardly ever permanent because values change, and when those values change, government commitments change. And finally, public policy is authoritative and coercive. When the government makes public policy, they can force you to go by it, force you to put a stamp on, to mail a letter, force you to stop at a red light. Those are ways in which government keeps order. Three important observations come to mind with respect to this definition. First, those in power include people in the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, certainly the bureaucracy. That means that some of these public policy officials are elected, some are not. All, however, hold positions of public authority. That's important. And as such, they're entitled to act. Second, those in position of public power are found at all levels of authority. National, President, Congress, judiciary. State, the governors, legislatures, the people at that level. Local, cities, counties, even all the way down to school districts and classrooms. All of these are public policy making environments. And finally, public policymakers may exercise their power, their authority, only within their spheres of constitutionally prescribed authority. Congress can't go ahead and make land use laws because those laws fall under the purview of the states and local governments. Local governments can't make foreign policy because those capabilities fall within the purview of the national government. As long as we remember that each of these various levels can make policies within their respective jurisdiction, everything is fine. The bottom line is simply this: public policy exists at all levels of authority. Public policy is made in order to make sure that society's values and needs are met and respected, and public policy is made by those in positions of authority who we empower as policymakers.
So that is a very short video that you can show your students either in middle school or in high school regarding public policy. I also like to use different resources from iCivics. This is a reflection on one of my students, and I was looking for a video yesterday, and I found this actually, at the end of Project Citizen, you have a reflection component, which I love that part. Because as a teacher, it's important to reflect on what we have learned, what we have shared with our students. And what he shared about public officials really and advocacy really struck me. It says, to conclude, during this experience with some public officials, I have learned many important things. I was educated that certain public officials can't take sides in legislation. These public officials need to be neutral when it comes to this, although most likely, morally, they take sides. They can publicly take sides now. However, while doing our project, we had to make sure that it had democratic values. Democratic value is valuing others' rights and not discriminating. So a 12-year-old, I think Alex was a 12-year-old kid who had just arrived from another country. And I know that for him, it was very difficult to comprehend that we could just pick up the phone and call our public official. He couldn't believe it. And most of my kids really like, can you pick up the phone and call a public official to influence public policy? I'm like, definitely you can. So I wanted to insert that. The reminders for influencing public policy, these are so important, guys. And Marcy was kind enough to share this with us. Know what you want to influence. And so when doing Project Citizen, you have to identify your topic. You have to identify what within your topic, because topics are so vast and large. So please make sure that when doing Project Citizen, you know exactly what is it that you want to influence. Number two, know who you want to influence. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Senator Bob Graham, he was a U.S. Senator, and Senator has retired now. He's no longer living in Miami, but all the way until February 2020, yeah, right before the pandemic, the senator came to many of our professional developments. And I remember he will repeat this constantly, and it will be that, please teach your students the difference between a state senator and a U.S. senator. So when Marcy share these points with me, I was like, Marcy, this is so great, on point. You need to learn, it matters. If you teach your students, hey, there's a difference between a mayor or a governor or a state senator or a U.S. senator. Make sure they know their name, that they can spell it correctly when they write the letters. Those are little things that Senator Graham used to go over, and it seems so meaningless at the time, but truly it does make a difference. Like Renee said, write a note. I remember when I was in the classroom, and like Renee was right, we used to be very persistent. But for Christmas, we all wrote them Christmas cards, just thanking them, or Thanksgiving, just a little note. Those are little things that make the legislator or the public official know that you know who they are. Know when to influence. I know for a fact that when legislators were in session, or it was just close to the end of that session for the year, nobody was going to listen to my students. There were times where you know that you can't call the mayor's office because there are things going on. So those things, know when you can influence and when you can influence. Build relationships and networks. And I'm going to let Marcy talk a little bit about that. But Project Citizen is all about relationships and teaching your students that those relationships with not just public officials, because when you do Project Citizen, you also have to build relationships with nonprofit organizations and groups that influence that policy, or that are for or against either one, and so forth. So that's very important. Marcy, go ahead and talk about 4, 5, and 6, please.
Yes, thanks, Jackie. And this is, I think, as part of teaching about public policy and the importance of understanding what it is, but also really advocating or influence public policy. So I agree that you not only want to know who to influence, but the timing of the influence and the communication is very important. I remember thinking about that with Samantha's students, with their contacting the Montgomery County Board of Education. You have to think about when the Board of Education is meeting. When would it be appropriate to present an idea to them? And I would say they have to also understand budget cycles. It wouldn't do any good to try to put something in a budget cycle for the Maryland General Assembly right now, because there's no one in Annapolis who's even looking at that, who's really taking note to it right now. So kids need to know that, and that's part of what you teach them with ways to influence and when to influence. The building relationships and networks, as a public policy person at the Maryland State Department of Education, I would say that my colleagues at all of my historical associations and my museum folks, my advocates at the county and local level, other social studies, comrades in arms, we would join together in our networks to influence what we thought was appropriate social studies policy. And it would be harder to say no to, for example, the Maryland Council for the Social Studies, when we've joined together as a network, and this is our policy ideas, and we are trying to influence the ideas of the General Assembly. So it's much harder to say no to a network of maybe a student council. So they need to understand that many voices and collaborators and networks are much more important than just one voice. And even if you're not successful the first time, they need to be thinking about number 5 with being proactive. So, okay, so the State Board of Education wasn't ready to hear about our ideas for changing the requirements uh, for music requirements or fine arts requirements or whatever it is that we're trying to promote. But maybe next year, at a different time of the budget cycle, or when there, or maybe when the governing board is meeting, if that would be a better time. But you have to be proactive, and you have to think about who weighs in being proactive. You just don't wait until the first day of the General Assembly to start being proactive. You have to really spend a season ahead thinking about it and being persistent. And you heard Senator Garcia talk about being persistent and the fact that Jackie and her students were very persistent. You know, you can smile and be persistent and write the letters and make the phone calls, but be persistent. And it's okay to be persistent if you do it in a polite, respectful way. And I think that's a very important trait. And have you noticed that some of our students aren't, I would say, they don't have the perseverance that I would like to have them all to have. I've noticed this in my college students that I work with. They seem to not want to persevere the way that I remember my middle school students were willing to do. So I think that being persistent and having perseverance is very important, and being patient, because our legislators and our executive members they're all busy people, just like Senator Garcia. We're all busy people doing our own thing. So be persistent and polite. Jackie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Marcy. Thank you. This I put this slide because he was coming. He's speaking to a group of teachers. Let me click on here. Okay, Dr. Carros hasn't not joined us. He is working at the ER, so definitely he probably has some emergency. So we'll hold on. We still have until 8:30. So teaching local policy making with iCivics resources. I was able to contact Emma today, the director for iCivics, and I just wanted to refresh my memory with all the resources that we have for iCivics. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to share 2 lessons that we have. They have a whole unit, so on in iCivics, but I wanted to share from my classes 2 documents. This is one of them. How many of you are familiar with iCivics? Most of you, correct? If you are not, just create a username and a password. iCivics and iCivics has amazing resources for the state of Florida. For the longest time, they have aligned our standards to the resources, but this is one of them that I love. I actually had it on my files, and it's got a problem, who you're going to call. And it teaches you step by step on the lesson, and it gives you everything as to where to go with the problem, how to reach out to public officials, group action, government action, and so forth. This is a great, great lesson. They actually have a unit. Emma emailed me today. They have a unit for advocacy, and I can include the link because she sent, I got it a little late today. So I'm gonna I edit the PowerPoint, put the link to the entire unit. I believe they have 7 lessons for public policy and advocacy. Sam, I know that you use iCivics now in the classroom. correct, Sam?
Yeah, so I will take bits and pieces
Okay.
to integrate it into how I teach Project Citizen. So did you perfect with the slides. So yeah, if you go to the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is just some of the things I would go over with my students. So I'm just going to go over the slides that how I teach my AP government students how to approach. This is like one of our day ones of Project Citizen. So similar to what you all just did, our activator that day is, how would you define policy? And then we can start having that class conversation about what is it not. And there's great activities that I can give you as well to extend that. We can go on to the next. And then I'll have students go into small groups or partners, and we go into, because our AP curriculum does not go into state and local politics and government structure in super detail, most of my students have absolutely no idea about how our local government is structured. They know about the national, but not the local. And so we will go over, as part of day one, is what is our county government, right? How is that structured? So this is one of the readings from Civics that goes into detail about, okay, what is a county government, right? How is that different than, say, a state government, national government? So just reiterating that federalism. And then also understand, I always tell my students when we are doing Project Citizen and they're coming up with ideas, to kind of get them to like root out things that are not public policy. I also ask them, well, can they do a budget with it? Right? Do you need funding for the policy that you want? And that gets them to kind of think of like, oh, maybe I can think about the budgeting aspect of that. And especially like one year my students did not do budget. There's always one that always does a budget. But I had students who wanted to change the way arts credits was done and sports credit and like PE credit was done at our county level. And so just getting them to get that distinction is very important. And you can talk about those differences as well. So just reiterating kind of the budget process at the local level and how that can be policy. If they find policies or programs that they want to see funded, or they want to propose something for funding, that is something that they can pursue. All right, next slide. And so I give them this graphic organizer. So I live in Montgomery County, Maryland. And so we do not have a commissioner, we have a county executive. And so we take the time to talk about the difference between the legislative, executive, judicial branch at the local level, right? And reminding them, hey, right, because of reserve powers of the states, right, it's the local governments and the state governments that can decide, for example, what our school policies will be, right? It's our county executive who actually enforces our local county rules, right? And then the county council in Montgomery County is the one that actually writes the laws and the rules that our county has to follow. And then also getting them to realize that the executive arm of the local government is also really big, right? That there's a lot of different agencies. And I know that's something that I need to get better at teaching at, is getting the students to realize like, okay, who in these agencies do I need to contact, right? Because even in those agencies are separate departments for right different aspects of policy. So I know that's something that I need to work on. And so just keep that in mind as you plan with your mentors and with your students. Go ahead.
Sam, and before we go on, for those of you who have the Project Citizen book, pages 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 talk about public policy, but in order to talk about public policy, you need to know how government works, right? You need to learn, students need to know about the 3 branches of government, like Sam shared. The local government might look different than the national government and the state government. And so the new version, the 3rd edition of the Project Citizen book, has amazing charts that you can use, the main parts of our community's government, main parts of our state governments, and it talks about laws are made and so forth. So I strongly recommend, if you guys have the book, for those of you who have the book, step 2, pages 6 through 10, talk about how, about the different branches of government and so forth. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Sam.
and I would just reiterate, this is like very foundational, right? Because students will have so many different ideas. And then you got to really help them narrow it down, saying, okay, who's a policymaker that can actually address this, right? Because if it's a school policy they want to change, like maybe uniforms, right? That always comes up, right? Then that's not something that maybe a school board of education will do unless it's, a public school system, right? If it's a private school system, because I did have one of my mentees for Project Citizen, her kids did want to do address school uniforms at their private Catholic school. And so they knew that they had to go to their equivalent of the principal. So just understanding, as we reiterated, who can actually make that decision, and really helping the students do their research about who can make that. And I will say, we obviously want to encourage students to pursue these policies, and that's the idea, but it's okay if they fail. I know my mentee, when they started doing the school uniform, that principal shot it down almost immediately, right? But that's a learning experience for the students, right? They don't have to necessarily be completely successful in implementing and getting their policy passed. It's the important is to understand the process of how to get there, and understanding the different perspectives that go into that policy making. That way students realize, like, oh, people and other policymakers have different ideas than I do, and how can I incorporate that and in my policy to make it more likely to succeed in the future, right? And you can move on to the next. So this is, same thing from iCivics. So something that I do is, I believe Jackie had shared this, is going to share this unit. So we do a little scenario where we have a fictional Miss Nelson's class, right, who are concerned about their science textbooks. And so the students have to go through that example of, like, okay, what is the process that Miss Nelson's class can do to get more funding for their textbooks? And what are different options, right? So we can move on to the next. And what I love about this iCivics lesson is that it teaches them right here, right? What we call in Project Citizen, you see it in the book, the different parts of civil society, right? So, okay, if they go to the private sphere, what will that do, right? If they go to for example, a school group, right, a nonprofit, what could that do? Versus what can they do if they actually go to the government and the school board, right? What might be advantages and disadvantages of going to those particular people or organizations or government officials? So getting that, you could even, if you don't want to use this exact scenario, you could even change it to something even more local to the kids. But this is just something that I use with iCivics that worked in my classroom. And then we can go to the next one. So as kind of like the summarizer of this kind of mini unit on county government and how you influence it, I have students basically write a paragraph with this scenario, right? So I say that, hey, the main intersection of a local high school might need a stop sign, right? It doesn't currently have one, and there's been accidents, right? So now that we know how our local government works, what is a policy that you want to see changed so that allows you to see, do they understand what a policy is, right? Because if not including something like a budget for a new stop sign or a new rule of where stop signs need to be, that is not public policy, right? The kids just can't simply plant a stop sign wherever they want, even if they bought one on Amazon, right? And then getting to local governance, right? I asked them, okay, what are the government agencies? And there could be multiple ones that you need to talk to, right? So getting them to think about, oh, I might need to go to the county council, but I also might need to work out with the budget people, right, in that local budget agency, whatever that is, the equivalent in your county or city, right? And then also the empowerment part, right? Realizing that as students, what can you do, right? How are you going to influence that county council to pass this rule or to pass the budget that you want? Or how are you going to convince the budget people to incorporate this, right? Things like that. And that's kind of the exit ticket that I use to evaluate, did they really understand what public policy is and how it works at our local level? So feel free to ask any questions about how I approach this. And again, this could take several days, right? Depending on your level of students. If you've taught national government structure before, if you've taught local or state government structure before, right? This can take several lessons if need be.
Thank you, Sam.
I just want to add on a couple things that Jackie and Sam were talking about. It is in level 1 and level 2 Project Citizen book about really how do you introduce public policy, if you have those books or you're interested in those resources. And I do want to really say a couple things that this whole idea of these spheres, these civil society spheres, that's one set of issues that you deal with, and then the personal issues. They especially middle school students, they really get confused. They want to fix issues that have nothing to do with the government. Well, that's a family issue, well, that's a community issue that is really your family's situation. But then the government sphere, the government influence. So for you to, there's a couple really nice worksheets in the teacher's manuals that puts a scenario out there, and the student has to decide if it's a government sphere or whether it's a civil society sphere or whether it's a private. And I do think that for the middle school students, they really need to have that distinction. And the other part I want to add with what Sam was talking about, I watched, I was a judge last year with Sam's class, and I really noticed what she was talking about when you're having a group of judges who represent the agency that you're working with. Like one group of her students were talking about the problems with not enough, I think it was fair housing.
Yeah.
Rules. Right, Sam?
Yeah, there was a local bill about because the COVID eviction rules were changing, and they wanted to kind of propose kind of a new mashup, so to speak, of two proposed bills.
Yeah, so that was a very high level. This was high school. My middle school kids would have never been able to do that, but it was very sophisticated. And she had invited members of the housing department, and there's all kinds of complexities in that department to interact with the kids. It was really very informative for everybody. So just, it is complicated, and I think the kids need to struggle with that and understand it. Back to you, Jackie.
Awesome. I want to bring you back to the book. I want to tell you, I love the Project Citizen book. When I did Project Citizen was 1996. It was a pilot program in Florida. I did it for 3 years. I never knew there was a teacher's edition until I went to a training in 1999. And Michael Fisher said, yeah, because the teacher edition. And I'm a teacher edition. I never bothered to look at the bottom of the book, the box. That's what the teacher edition was. But I love the teacher edition, especially the new one. And if you go to pages 4 through, I believe it's 6. Yeah, 4 through 6. It has all the little charts on government and so forth. But also, if you're a new teacher to Project Citizen, it guides you. It's pretty much like a lesson plan. It tells you, have your students read and discuss defining a public policy, blah, 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 blah. So if you're a new teacher or if you are a mentor to a new teacher, please do not hesitate to use the book. I personally like the new edition, the 3rd edition, I think, but I also like to use the high school book. My preference is the middle school book because we have a large population of ELL students in South Florida, as you can imagine, and the middle school book works for both, for high school and middle school, but we have both. Another thing I wanted to piggyback on what Sammy said, I love what she says. Do not feel scared if your students fail. And I can tell you that was the best lesson I could have given my students. Because imagine after 2001, coming a governor sign a bill into law in front of everybody, the expectation was, oh, we're going to pass bills into law all the time. And I did not want my students to feel that that was the only measurement of success. Okay. Success in Project Citizen for you as a teacher, as a mentor, is to expose them, to expose the students that they can influence public policy, not necessarily pass public policy. Those are two complete different things. Obviously, they want to influence to the point that that policy, because they strongly believe in that policy, will tackle that particular issue in their community, will pass. But if it doesn't, the lesson is there and they can use that lesson for the rest of their lives. For the rest of their lives. That's one thing. Um, I remember we got emotionally involved in a bill for drunk drivers. Actually, Renee's, the senator's grandmother, passed away in Cuba, killed by a drunk driver. So imagine all my students were emotionally involved, including myself. We met somebody who had his only daughter, her only daughter. She was a school librarian. Her only daughter had passed away, killed by a drunk driver. We went to the scene. We met the sergeant that got to the scene as soon as she was killed. She was killed by another young woman who was driving drunk because she wanted to get home to get money because her parents were living out of town. This other young girl went rollerblading and she pinned her to a tree. Only child. Imagine when we met the mother and so forth, that policy died. Senator Garcia wanted it so bad, and that policy died. That bill died the last day of the legislature. And I remember I took it to heart. I went outside for a run and I started crying. And who do I see? Senator Bob Graham. And he, of course, is like, "Why are you crying?" And I said, and I told him the whole story. He's like, "Jackie, come to my house. We need to talk." And he sat me down and he says, "Do you know how many bills I've introduced in my during my time in Congress?" And obviously I didn't. But the moral of the story is there were a lot of bills that he either had sponsor or co-sponsor, and only very few had passed. But not to measure success in that. And I think we as educators, sometimes we can get emotionally involved in our topics, and we need to be careful that the lesson is not to successfully pass legislation or whatever policy we're working on, but our students are exposed to how to do it. So in the future, when they grow up, they can continue doing that. That is the beautiful thing about Project Citizen and the lifelong impact that this program has on the students.
And just to confirm what Jackie's saying, it really is. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but it is a good lesson that you're not always going to get a bill passed or a school board decision changed or even changing a school policy, lunch policy. But it's the process and the fact that the students know that there are, even what a policy is. I mean, I hate to say it, but most adults don't understand public policy or public policy making. So just that lesson alone is very critical with this whole program. And that's why I think you really need to spend time. You heard Sam talk about it, that she spends 2 or 3 days working with policy, and she's working with government students. For me, at the middle school level, I was working with 8th graders, and although they understood, and sometimes 6th graders, so you have to figure out what they know. Sometimes you have to do a mini lesson on the levels of government, or in a lesson on federalism. So all of those things are important. Thanks for sharing, Jackie. And did we see what Emily was talking about? There are Spanish versions.
Yes.
Of Project Citizen.
They are. Thank you, Emily. Yes. I think that it is 8:13, and I think we have been talking a lot, and I suppose many of you have questions for us regarding public policy and advocacy. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if you guys have any questions. Emily, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would encourage folks, if you do have a question, to go ahead and you can take yourself off mute if you want to. You can raise your hand, but we can all be friends. So yes, if you have questions, please go ahead and hop in. We've had a lot of great practical knowledge from Sam and from Jackie and from Marcy. So any practical or logistical questions that you all have, now is the time to do it.
So I was just wondering, I'm in the field of being formerly in education and now working through a historical society. What's most needed as far as people that are involved in Project Citizen from community associations like ours? What kind of resources can we provide? What's most needed that might be lacking?
Think your organization plays a pivotal role in the sense that can provide that information. Many times when we are researching problems, they need the historical background, what has happened in the past, how has that problem evolved, what has changed over the years. And I think that is a pivotal role, Beth, that your organization can play, even guiding your students, who to reach out to and so forth. Or maybe those connections that your organization has with public officials or different offices, you can guide them and help them out in that way. Marcy, do you have any else?
Yeah, I
Anything
think
else?
I agree with what Jackie was saying, and I remember having a problem finding healthcare officials or having access to them for one of the problems my students was dealing with one year. So just having resource people like you in the community, knowing where you are and you're willing to be a resource to the class. And also very critical, Sam would say this immediately, having judges come in and listen to the students, their proposals, and giving them some feedback on it is very important. Having community members in the classroom. Sam, I know it's always tricky for you to get people into and the right people, depending upon the policy that they're proposing.
For sure. And I would say just reaching out, letting those teachers, like, especially if you know that they're the teachers who are teaching Project Citizen, letting them know, like, hey, I'm available, like, I'm willing to work with your class even, or provide like research information, right, if you can't physically come in. But definitely judging, because I think another key part of all the center programs, whether it's We the People or Project Citizen, students realizing that adults are listening to them and like engaging them in actual conversation. Because too often students don't get that from adults. And so that's very important.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Beth. Any other questions? I do want to give a shout out to John Hill. I think he's here, and I haven't seen him in years. I only see him on Facebook sometimes. So, hi, John.
He may have had to step out of the call.
We also have some Project Citizen mentors and coordinators here with us today. Can you offer up some advice, some ideas that you use when you're teaching policy or you're introducing it?
Sally. Hi, Sally. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi. Hey, we did so much last week or a couple weeks ago. Some of the things that you guys talked about today, from even talking about levels of government and whatnot, we actually covered some of those strategies. So I just kind of want to emphasize that people might want to take a look at the link that Emily posted in the chat a bit ago. How's that?
That's wonderful.
Absolutely, Sally. You did a great job. I was thinking about that too, because this process is so interwoven.
Right.
You can't just, you can't begin talking about it without saying, oh, but this is really about developing policy.
Right.
It's not just service learning. It's just not an action project. It is involves policy and influencing policy. And I think that's the critical part that is so hard to, well, you really need time to develop that with teachers and with students. So, but I think you all did a wonderful job with that
Yes.
last month or beginning of the month, Sally. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
We have Kathleen here too. Kathleen, how about you? Do you want to offer up some ideas?
Kathleen.
The thing that I tell teachers is let the students do the work and let them discover what their community issues are. And that is such an important part of the process, is letting students who would not normally talk to each other wind up needing to work together, talk to each other, work things out. They learn empathy, they learn research, they learn communication, they learn procrastination, which is a really big one. The reflection piece is so crucial for that.
Yeah.
And so letting the teachers let go to let the students do what they need to do in order to do their project citizen work, because it's truly unlimited what they accomplish. And it's amazing what grade levels they are, that they can just do so much. So that's the only thing I could add to that.
Thank you, Kathleen. Sage advice.
Yes.
All right. Any final questions?
If we don't have any more questions, I just want to leave you with the following. Remember that you need to know what you're influencing. You know, pick a problem, which is the next step in the book, page 11. It also interacts with identifying public policy issues. You need to identify your problem in order to influence that or try to find a solution to that problem. Know your legislators, know your public officials, know your city council members, know your mayor, know the people that you're trying to influence. Be persistent, like as Sally stated. Don't be rude or, call all the time. Know when to influence. And I think if you put into practice those steps, I know they've helped me tremendously, and I know Marcy and I spoke about that. You will be successful when influencing public policy and advocacy.
Ron, did you have a comment that you wanted to add?
Is this the Ron you're asking about?
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, this has been great. I am not a part of your activity. I've been on the email list for a while. I kind of stumbled across the email this morning about this webinar, and I'm really happy that I spent the last 90 minutes. This has been great stuff. I would just add a couple of things. In my perspective, I've been around the advocacy stuff for now 49 years. I was in the Pennsylvania legislature for 24 years, chaired the ed committee, have for the last 25 years headed up a not-for-profit. Several things. One, in terms of getting students to understand policy, what I did not hear, a word that I did not hear used is relevancy. Sometimes helping them just understand the relevancy of policy, the fact they've got to go to school, when they can get a driver's license, who can be their teacher, what opportunities they might have for post-secondary education, on and on. But getting them to think about the relevancy of public policy as it's affecting their life. And then secondly, getting them to stretch their imagination about the potential of good public policy. I think this is where you get into your, finding the problem and coming up with some kind of an idea for a solution, but stretch their imagination. That's why I always emphasize, what I always emphasize with our own leadership programs. There's great stuff that you folks all said about relationship building and about persistence and about tenacity. The folks who are tenacious are the winners. I spent 8 years working on an early intervention law in Pennsylvania that started with 3 parents approaching me. And 8 years later, we had a law. We went from $0 in Pennsylvania for early intervention to now almost $500 million in our state budget. So getting people to, again, stretch imagination, but be persistent as well. And then just several other real quick things. I was on the receiving end of visits for 24 years. It is amazing the number of people, the number of visitors who would come in and never ask me to do something. So reminding those who are going to advocate, ask your policymaker to do something. It may just be come visit you. It may be to give a speech. It may be to write a letter. It may be to introduce a bill. It may be to vote a certain way. But ask them to do something. Have an ask for which you can hold them accountable. And then somebody else alluded to this, but they didn't use the word storytelling. Storytelling is so powerful in terms of moving lawmakers. You know, I'm a data geek. I remember the numbers, but what I remember is 28 years ago, a person, I'm pointing to a section of my room here, where somebody sat there and told me about the impact of us giving a piece of paper, their diploma they waved at me, when they weren't ready to read or write, or as they said, ever get a good job. So the power of storytelling, the power of getting them onto your turf, whether it's your school, your not-for-profit, wherever it might be. And I would add, a lot of lawmakers are going to pay attention to who can vote for me, who can run against me. That 12-year-old may not be able to run against me, but their parent could. Their teacher can vote for me. And so getting the lawmaker onto your turf, but be supported by those other folks, who may be able to cast a vote. That will help influence. And then the final thing, I think it was Marcy who mentioned your work in the Department of Ed and coalition building. The power of coalition building is enormous. When everybody is coming to me but has a very different ask, even competing messages, I get to decide. But when you all come together with a common voice, a common message, you put extraordinary burden on me because you're all speaking with one voice. So those are just a few things that I would add, but congratulations on the great work that you're doing. And Emily, I'm going to try to link you into one of our leadership programs in Pennsylvania for mostly professional, well-seasoned educators. But we'll talk about that on another day.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ron. I really
Thank you,
appreciate
Ron.
your perspective.
Can I end with a story since Ron queued us up for storytelling?
Absolutely, Marcy.
So in February 2020, I was teaching Project Citizen in Sarajevo. And I started off with an 18-minute video clip that many of you have seen, or if you haven't, you should see. And it's about the World Congress on Project Citizen that occurred in the year 2000 in Washington, D.C. It was hosted by the Center for Civic Education and Civitas. One of the teams that was invited to Washington, D.C. was from Bosnia-Herzegovina. And as I was talking to this group of professors who were all teaching Project Citizen, they had decided to write a textbook on how to be more inclusive in the classroom, and how could we include some techniques and ideas from special education to be a more inclusive schools, to have more inclusive schools in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And I showed them this video clip of this team from their own country, and the Project Citizen policy that was proposed by this group of students was to have more inclusive classrooms. And I looked across the room and half of the professors were crying, and I'm looking at them, and I said, "Do you know these children?" And they looked at me and they said, "We know these children." And that young lady who's the spokesperson, she's a medical doctor now. Wow. And we all know her. She is such an advocate for special education students because her own sister had special needs. And they looked at me and they said, "We've never seen this video clip before. Where is it? How did you get it?" It just so happened I had the 2.5 hour of video DVD of it that I gave to them. But I just want to tell you the power of storytelling. You're exactly right, Ron. I could tell Project Citizen stories all day long, but that one brought tears to all of our eyes because I knew something was wrong when no one said a word. And I'm like, what just happened? And they said, they explained to me how they know her and who she still is in their small country of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So Project Citizen empowers young people. And thank you for being with us tonight. Jackie and Sam, say the last words.
Thank you all. That's it. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Sammy. Thank you so much, Marcy.
Thank you. Well, and Marcy, you've actually queued us up really nicely. Our next session is November 14th. So it'll be a little bit longer because in 2 weeks on Tuesday, it's election day. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that a lot of you are probably busy or you perhaps are not at school that day. So we're going to meet again on the 14th and we'll convene and talk about action plans, which is the next key part of the Project Citizen project for the students. So thank you all so much. Thank you to everybody who presented this evening. This was amazing. And I will upload the recording on our Project Citizen page, but that's also where you can register for the upcoming sessions as well.